She hid in the Korean Mafia boss's car to escape her abusive biker ex. He whispered, "You're mine now." Honestly, I didn't know the man sitting in that dark Mercedes was Houston's most feared crime lord. I only knew that the man hunting me through downtown streets was going to sell me to a Mexican cartel for $75,000. If the idea of escaping a monster only to become the obsession of a dragon makes your heart race, you need to hear this story. Because the choice I make in the next 10 seconds doesn't just change my life. It rewrites my entire existence. The fingerprint bruises on my throat were only 2 days old. Still purple-black reminders of Howard's rage when I accidentally deleted a recording on his burner phone. That was my reality. A minefield of invisible rules where breathing wrong could detonate his fists. I stayed because I believed him when he said I was too damaged, too much trouble, that no man would ever choose someone like me. I stayed because he made me believe I was lucky he tolerated me at all. I stayed until this morning. Until I found the burner phone charging in our Pearland garage, the screen glowing with text that turned my blood to ice. Cartel confirmed. $75,000 for the girl. Friday delivery. Navigation warehouse. Fresh merchandise for their Dallas pipeline. 3 years of survival instincts, of making myself invisible, of swallowing my voice. All of it shattered in that moment. The sheer cold terror of being inventory, not a girlfriend, overrode every conditioned response Howard had beaten into me. I ran with nothing but my purse and keys, my Honda Accord tearing out of our driveway as his roar, "Keisha," echoed behind me like a death sentence. Welcome to stories of power, passion, and women who refuse to stay broken. If you're here for dark romance where survival becomes sovereignty, hit that subscribe button now. Your support means everything. Let's build this community together. Now let's see how Keisha's choice in the next 10 seconds changes everything. I made it to I-45 before I heard them. The thunder of 6 Harley-Davidson engines, the Iron Skulls Motorcycle Club hunting me through Houston's afternoon traffic. Panic strips away logic. When Howard's bikes forced me off the highway near downtown, I abandoned my car by Discovery Green and ran barefoot through August heat that felt like running through fire. The Four Seasons parking garage loomed ahead, a sanctuary I had no business entering. My lungs burned, my body shuddering with every desperate gasp as I dove into the underground levels. Howard's Harley engine echoed off concrete walls, the sound bouncing, disorienting, getting closer with every second. I was trapped. Cornered. Out of options. That's when I saw it. A black Mercedes Maybach S-Class, windows tinted dark as obsidian, driver's door barely ajar. An invitation from fate or the devil. I couldn't tell which and I was too terrified to care. I slipped into the back seat and pulled the door closed with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in my ears. The interior smelled of expensive leather and something else. Sandalwood and danger. I curled behind the passenger seat, making myself as small as possible, a skill I'd perfected over 3 years of surviving Howard's moods. Through the tinted glass, I watched Howard's silhouette prowl between cars, his steel-toed boots striking concrete with predatory rhythm. He was close enough that I could hear him breathing heavy with rage. Then another figure appeared in my line of sight. A man in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, perfectly tailored despite Houston's brutal heat. Even from my hiding place I could see the ink creeping up his neck, Korean characters and what looked like scales. His face was all sharp angles and cold beauty, like a blade forged from ice and violence. Jin-mok. Though I didn't know his name yet. Howard spotted him, swaggered over with the false confidence of a man used to intimidating people. "You seen a black woman? Red dress, running, probably crying." The man in the suit turned slowly and something about the movement made my breath catch. It was the stillness of a predator who knows he's apex. No. His voice was accented, precise, colder than the air conditioning in the Mercedes. "But if I discover someone hiding in my vehicle, I will decide what becomes of her. Not you." Howard's hand moved toward his belt, where I knew he kept a knife, but something in the other man's eyes stopped him. After a tense moment that felt like an eternity, Howard backed down, muttering curses as he stalked away to search another level. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the weight of new eyes on me. The driver's door opened. The man folded himself into the seat with lethal grace, adjusting the rearview mirror until his obsidian eyes locked onto mine in the reflection. "You have 10 seconds to convince me not to call him back." My voice came out as a broken whisper. He's going to sell me to the cartel. Please. Jin-mok studied me in the mirror for what felt like forever, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled out his phone and my heart stopped, until he spoke in rapid Korean to someone on the other end, words I didn't understand but could feel in my bones were about me. He ended the call and met my eyes again in the rearview mirror. You're coming with me. Not a question. Not even an offer. A claim. And as two black SUVs pulled up beside us and men in dark suits emerged, I realized with bone-deep certainty that I hadn't escaped a monster. I'd just been claimed by a dragon. And dragons don't protect without a price. You're coming with me, he said. I looked at him and nodded. He yelled at his driver and off we went. The penthouse was a study in controlled opulence, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Buffalo Bayou, where Houston's skyline glittered like scattered diamonds against the night. Everything was clean lines and muted tones, the kind of minimalist luxury that whispered money so old it didn't need to shout. A single piece of abstract art dominated one wall, probably worth more than everything I'd owned in my entire life. I stood in the center of the living room, still barefoot, still wearing my torn red dress, feeling like a bloodstain on expensive white carpet. Jin-mok disappeared down a hallway without a word, leaving me with a man who introduced himself as David Park, head of security. His instructions were delivered in the same flat tone you'd used to explain how to operate a coffee maker. Don't leave without escort, don't contact anyone from your previous life, don't ask questions about business. Each rule felt like a bar sliding into place on a very beautiful cage. There's clothes in your room. Toiletries. Everything you need. David's eyes were kind but firm. Mr. CO expects you'll be comfortable. Comfortable. The word felt foreign in my mouth. That night, I lay in a guest room that could have been featured in Architectural Digest, Egyptian cotton sheets that probably cost more than my monthly rent at Howard's Place. Sleep was impossible. Around 2 a.m. I heard it, muffled sounds from somewhere below. The struggle. Raised voices in Korean. Then a single gunshot that made my entire body go rigid. Then nothing but silence. I didn't sleep after that. Morning arrived with brutal Texas sunshine. I found Jin-mok in the kitchen, immaculate in a fresh suit despite the early hour, setting out breakfast like last night's violence had been a fever dream. The spread was surreal. Korean banchan in small ceramic dishes alongside kolaches from a local bakery, east meeting west on expensive white plates. Hungry. He pulled out a chair for me, the gesture almost gentle. I sat because my legs were shaking. What happened last night? Howard won't be a problem anymore. His tone was conversational, like he'd just mentioned taking out the trash. He's dead. The coffee cup I'd been reaching for slipped from my fingers, only Jin-mok's quick reflexes preventing it from shattering. His hand closed over mine, steadying the cup, and the contact sent electricity racing up my arm, unwanted, undeniable, terrifying in its intensity. Easy, he murmured, those dark eyes holding mine. You're safe now. But was I? I'd traded Howard's chaos for Jin-mok's cold control, his explosions for this man's calculated precision. Which was more dangerous? What do you want from me? The question came out smaller than I intended. Jin-mok released my hand, leaned back in his chair with unnerving calm. Howard sold you. I bought your debt. The difference is I'm giving you a choice. He pushed a Toomey briefcase across the table. Stay under my protection while I dismantle the trafficking network that would have swallowed you whole. Or take $100,000, a new identity, and disappear to whatever state you choose. But decide quickly. His eyes hardened. The cartel still considers you their merchandise. My breath caught. When was the last time I'd had one of those? I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. He stood, adjusting his Patek Philippe watch with casual elegance. Everything you need is here. Make yourself at home. After he left, I wandered the penthouse like a ghost, running my fingers over furniture I was afraid to sit on. In what looked like a home office, I found a burner phone tucked behind a row of leather-bound books, probably forgotten or deliberately hidden. My hands shook as I powered it on. The ledger opened to a recent entry, clinical and devastating. Asset KL, acquired $100,000. Iron Skull's debt settlement $75,000 plus cartel interference fee $15,000 plus retrieval/protection $10,000. Total investment, $100,000. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. I wasn't a person being protected. I was inventory with an itemized receipt. And the price tag on my new cage was exactly $100,000. I found Jin-mok in his home office at dawn, already dressed for business, reviewing contracts like he hadn't orchestrated a murder 12 hours earlier. I slammed the burner phone on his desk hard enough to make his coffee cup rattle. "Do you own me?" My voice shook with fury I'd forgotten I could feel. "Asset KL. $100,000. Am I your property now?" He didn't flinch, didn't pretend surprise. Instead he closed his laptop with deliberate care and met my eyes with brutal honesty that somehow hurt worse than lies. "In my world everything has a price. I paid yours." He stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. "That makes you valuable, not property but an asset worth protecting." "What's the difference?" "The difference is choice." He gestured to the window overlooking Houston's downtown skyline. Howard's Iron Skulls were street-level distributors for the Sinaloa Cartel. Small players in a massive operation. By taking you, I disrupted a $75,000 transaction. His jaw tightened. "The cartel will come for you on principle. Not because they want you specifically but because letting the disruption slide makes them look weak." My stomach dropped. "So I'm still merchandise?" "Yes. Unless you become something more dangerous than merchandise." He studied me with those calculating eyes. "If you want to survive, you need to understand power. How it's taken. How it's held. How it's used." That's how I ended up in his building's private shooting range 2 hours later, a Glock 19 feeling impossibly heavy in my shaking hands. Jin-mok stood behind me, his body close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, his hands adjusting my grip with clinical precision. "Breathe out when you squeeze the trigger," he murmured against my ear, his breath raising goosebumps along my neck. "Anticipation makes you miss." I fired. The recoil shocked through my arms, but the bullet hit center mass on the target. Again. By the time we finished, my hands had stopped shaking. Something had shifted inside me, fear transforming into something sharper, more focused. Later, at the Galleria, Jin-mok insisted on appropriate wardrobe for whatever this new life entailed. Inside Neiman Marcus, a sales associate's smile turned glacial when she saw me. A black woman in yesterday's clothes, clearly out of place among the Chanel and Prada. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a different store," she suggested with poisonous sweetness. Jin-mok's response was surgical precision. Within minutes, he'd purchased $50,000 worth of merchandise in my name, requested the manager, and had the woman fired while we watched. Then he arranged for everything to be donated to a Houston domestic violence shelter. "That," he said as we left, "is how you use power. Not violence. Strategy." I was still processing the demonstration when his phone buzzed in the car. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening in a way that made my pulse spike. "What is it?" He showed me the message. "Sinaloa Cartel demands return of merchandise by Friday or face war. She belongs to us." My blood turned to ice. Friday was 3 days away. Jin-mok deleted the message with a single swipe, his eyes meeting mine with dark intensity. "They can demand all they want." His voice dropped, possessive and absolute. "You're mine now." The words should have terrified me. Should have triggered every survival instinct Howard had beaten into me about men who claimed ownership. Instead, something primal and dangerous ignited low in my belly, something that felt dangerously like want. And that terrified me more than the cartel ever could. Jin-mok's restaurant in Midtown was the kind of place where Houston's power brokers brokered deals over Korean short ribs and aged whiskey. I sat in a private dining room, watching through one-way glass as a man in an expensive suit but dead eyes was escorted to Jin-mok's table. "That's Hector," David Park murmured beside me. "Cartel's negotiator." My stomach twisted as I watched the conversation unfold. Even without hearing words, I could read the tension in every gesture. Hector's flat smile, Jin-mok's absolute stillness. When Jin-mok finally brought me into the room, Hector's eyes assessed me like livestock at auction. "She's worth $75,000. You pay triple, $225,000, plus damages for disruption of business." Jin-mok's laugh was cold enough to frost the windows. "No. Then return our merchandise." "Also no." Jin-mok leaned back, his posture radiating lethal calm. "Keisha Lawrence is under my permanent protection. I'm offering you compensation, Priority access to Port of Houston shipping routes. Worth millions more than your little transaction. The insult landed like a slap. I was worth more than their entire operation. Hector's jaw tightened. You're starting a war over a woman. That's weakness. No. Jin-mok's voice dropped to a razor's edge. I'm proving my territory is non-negotiable. That's strength. Tell your bosses they can accept my terms or test them. Their choice. After Hector left, I confronted Jin-mok in his office, my voice shaking. Men are going to die because of me. Why are you doing this? For the first time since I'd met him, something cracked in that perfect control. Because if I give you to them, I'm no different than Howard. He turned away, staring out at the Houston skyline. I've spent years building an empire where I control my own fate. The moment I compromise on something this fundamental, I've already lost everything that matters. I'm not worth a war. That's not your decision to make. That night, I found him on the penthouse balcony, the city lights reflecting in the Buffalo Bayou below. The August heat had finally broken, and the air felt almost breathable. You should know why I stayed with Howard, I said quietly. He spent 3 years convincing me I was too much trouble, too damaged, that I should be grateful anyone tolerated me. I made myself smaller every day until I almost disappeared completely. Jin-mok turned, his dark eyes intense. And now I don't know who I am anymore. He moved closer, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with devastating gentleness. You're beautiful when you're not afraid. I'm terrified, I whispered. Good. Fear keeps you smart. His thumb traced my jawline and I stopped breathing. But you don't have to be afraid of me. The space between us felt electric, charged with everything unspoken. I wanted him to close the distance, to take the choice away so I wouldn't have to make it. Instead, he stepped back, his restraint visible in every taut muscle. When you kiss me, if you kiss me, it will be because you chose to. Not because you feel grateful or obligated or afraid. His voice roughened. I can wait. The moment shattered as an orange glow bloomed across the Fifth Ward skyline. Then another. David Park burst onto the balcony, phone in hand, face grim. Sir, it started. The cartel hit 3 locations simultaneously. Restaurants, warehouses, everything's burning. Jin-mok's expression went cold and lethal. Casualties. Unknown. Emergency services are responding now. I stared at the flames painting Houston's sky, my chest tight with guilt and horror. The war had begun. And it was all because of me. The war came fast and brutal. Over 3 days, the Sinaloa cartel burned through Houston like wildfire. Jin-mok's restaurants torched, his shipping warehouse in the East End riddled with bullets. 2 of his men ambushed in Gulf Gate and left for dead. The city I'd once known transformed into a chessboard where every move cost blood. Worse, Mason Cole emerged from the Iron Skull's shadows, Howard's calculating second-in-command, now leading the MC in alliance with the cartel. He saw opportunity in chaos. Eliminate Jin-mok, prove his value to the Sinaloa bosses, and control Houston's underworld himself. I couldn't hide in the penthouse while people died because of me. Train me, I demanded, finding Jin-mok in his office at 3 a.m., reviewing security footage of the latest attack. No. You said I needed to understand power. Teach me. His jaw tightened. This isn't shooting paper targets, Keisha. This is survival. Then teach me to survive. David Park's training was brutality disguised as education. Krav Maga sessions left me bruised and gasping, my body relearning itself as something other than a target. But alongside the physical training came something unexpected. Tactical analysis, threat assessment, operational planning. My event planning background, all those years coordinating hotel conferences and wedding logistics, translated eerily well to coordinating strike teams and supply routes. I could see patterns, anticipate complications, plan contingencies. The night everything changed, we hit an Iron Skull's safe house in Humble. A retaliatory strike meant to send Mason a message. I was monitoring communications from the vehicle when something clicked wrong in the tactical chatter. Wait. I grabbed Jin-mok's arm as he prepared to enter. David, hold position. Southwest corner. Those propane tanks weren't there in the reconnaissance photos from yesterday. Jin-mok's eyes narrowed, following my line of sight. He made a signal. 2 of his men approached carefully, found tripwires connecting the tanks to the back entrance. We'd almost walked into a kill box. After we extracted safely, Jin-mok looked at me differently. Not like something fragile to protect but like something dangerous to respect. Back at the penthouse, adrenaline crashed into exhaustion. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I tried to clean a gash on my forearm from climbing through a window. Jin-mok took the first aid kit from my trembling fingers, his touch impossibly gentle for hands I'd seen break bones. "You were magnificent tonight," he murmured, cleaning the wound with careful precision. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. His thumb traced the inside of my wrist, right over my racing pulse. It's acting despite it. We were inches apart, his breath warm against my lips. Every nerve in my body screamed to close the distance, to lose myself in him and forget the violence and fear. I leaned in. He pulled back, jaw clenched with visible restraint. "Not like this. Not when you're running on adrenaline and gratitude and fear." His voice roughened. "When I kiss you, Keisha, you'll have no doubt it's what you want. No doubt it's a choice, not a reaction." The words hit harder than any kiss could have. Howard had taken my choices. Jin-mok kept giving them back. I was still processing that revelation when the penthouse intercom buzzed. David's voice came through tense. "Sir, we have a problem." "Police." Detective Sarah Chin stood in the lobby, warrant in hand and steel in her eyes. I watched on the security monitor as she explained to David that she'd connected 3 murders to Jin-mok's organization. Murders I knew were justified executions of men who'd betrayed him to the cartel. Jin-mok took the warrant calmly, reading it with the same focus he gave everything. When he looked up, his expression was carved from ice. 48 hours until she returns with arrest warrants. He met my eyes. "We're fighting on 2 fronts now. The cartel wanted me dead. The law wanted Jin-mok in prison. And we had 2 days to survive both. If you're feeling that tension between Keisha and Jin-mok, drop a comment and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, it gets even more intense. Let me know, are you Team Jin-mok or are you still cautious? Comment below. Mason Cole requested the meeting at a Starbucks in the Heights. Neutral territory, public enough to suggest good faith. I watched through the tinted windows of Jin-mok's Mercedes as Mason arrived on a Harley, his iron skulls cut replaced with expensive leather that screamed nouveau riche. "He's trying too hard," I murmured. Jin-mok's lips quirked. "Explain." "Designer jeans, that Rolex, it's costume. He's dressing for the role he wants, not the one he has. My event planning years had taught me to read people through their choices. He's performing." Inside, Mason's pitch was smooth. He wanted to end the bloodshed, take Howard's place officially, and feed Jin-mok intelligence about the cartel's next move, a major strike on the Rice military penthouse within 48 hours. In exchange, he wanted protection and a seat at Jin-mok's table. Through the earpiece David had given me, I listened to every word while watching Mason's face. His mouth smiled, but his eyes kept darting to the door. His hands were too still. "Wrong. It's a trap," I said into my mic. Jin-mok's reply was calm. "I know. But we'll use it against him." We prepared for the penthouse strike like we were expecting it, because we were. Jin-mok's team positioned throughout the building, weapons ready, escape routes clear. When the cartel sicarios came through the parking garage at 3 a.m., we were waiting. The firefight was brutal and brief. In the aftermath, one of the wounded attackers laughed through bloodied teeth. "Mason sends his regards. He's coming for everything you have." But the real betrayal cut deeper. David Park's own lieutenant, a man named Shin who'd been with the organization for 5 years, tried to slip away during the chaos. Jin-mok's men caught him at the stairwell. "Mason promised us all a fortune," Shin gasped, dying from a gut wound. "You're finished, Jin-mok. He's already won." Then with his last breath, Port of Houston. 72 hours. Biggest shipment of the year. He's taking it all. After the bodies were removed and the crime scene sanitized, I found myself alone on the balcony, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the railing. I'd shot someone tonight. Watched the light leave his eyes. Jin-mok found me there, his presence solid and grounding. "I killed someone," I whispered. "I know." He didn't touch me, just stood close enough that I could feel his warmth. That weight never fully leaves. "But you protected people you care about. That matters." I turned to face him, this man who'd bought me like property and somehow gave me back my power instead. "Do I care about you?" His carefully controlled expression cracked. something raw and vulnerable showing through. I hope so. Because I'm finding it impossible not to care about you. We spent the next hours planning the Port of Houston operation. 72 hours to intercept Mason's shipment and end this war. Maps spread across the dining table, coffee from Jin-mok's expensive espresso machine going cold in our cups, tactical scenarios debated and discarded. Around 4 a.m., exhaustion and adrenaline and something far more dangerous than both. I looked up from the blueprints and saw him watching me with an intensity that stole my breath. I stood, crossed the room, made the choice he'd refused to make for me. When I kissed him, it was deliberate, conscious, mine. He froze for a heartbeat, then his hand came up to cup my face with devastating gentleness. Are you sure? He whispered against my lips. I've never been more sure of anything. This time he didn't pull away. Jin-mok kissed me like I was something precious and dangerous all at once. Hands gentle despite their capacity for violence, asking permission with every touch. When he lifted me, carrying me to his bedroom with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Houston's glittering skyline, I felt desired without feeling owned for the first time in years. Tell me if you want to stop, he murmured against my neck, his restraint visible in every taut muscle. Any time. Any reason. Howard had never asked. Had never cared if I wanted to stop. I don't want to stop, I whispered and felt him shudder against me. What happened between us was passionate but tender. Emotionally rich in ways I hadn't known intimacy could be. Two damaged people choosing trust despite every reason not to. When it was over, we lay tangled in sheets that probably cost more than my first car, the city lights painting patterns across our skin. I never expected this, Jin-mok said quietly, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my shoulder. I've spent years controlling everything, trusting no one. Building walls so high I forgot what it felt like to let someone in. He turned to face me. You've become the exception to every rule I built. My throat tightened. I'm falling for a man who could destroy me more thoroughly than Howard ever could. Who's more dangerous, more powerful, more capable of breaking me. I met his eyes. But somehow I trust you not to. He cupped my face with devastating gentleness. I will never use your love as a weapon. If you choose to walk away tomorrow, next week, next year, you walk away free and safe. That's my vow, Keisha. Your love is a gift, not a contract. I kissed him then, tasting salt from tears I hadn't realized I'd shed. This was what safety felt like. Not the absence of danger but the presence of choice. His phone shattered the moment with violent buzzing. Jin-mok's expression went cold as he read the screen. What is it? Mason moved the timeline. The shipment's happening in 12 hours, not 72. He was already pulling on clothes, his movements precise and controlled. He knew we were planning for 3 days. We've been outmaneuvered. My stomach dropped. What about Detective Chin? She accelerated her investigation too. She'll be here with arrest warrants by morning. He grabbed his watch, that Patek Philippe that probably cost more than a house, and his jaw tightened. We're out of time on every front. I dressed quickly, my hands steadier than they should have been. As Jin-mok opened his safe to retrieve weapons and documents, something caught my eye. A jade ring with an intricate dragon carving, sitting in a velvet box. My family's signet, he explained, following my gaze. Given to the head of our organization. It's been passed down for 5 generations. He picked up the box, holding it like it weighed more than jade should. Someday, if we survive this, I want you to wear it. Not as my possession but as my equal. The words hit me harder than any kiss. Equal. Not kept woman, not protected asset. Equal. Before I could respond, David Park burst through the door without knocking, his face grim. Sir, they're moving the shipment now. Mason's at the Port of Houston with 40 men. We have maybe 30 minutes before it's loaded and gone. Jin-mok's hand found mine, squeezed once. Are you ready? I thought about that woman who'd hidden in his car 2 weeks ago, terrified and broken. She'd been surviving. The woman standing here now was ready to fight. Let's end this. The Port of Houston at 3 a.m. was a maze of shipping containers and shadows, the smell of salt water and diesel thick in the humid air. Jin-mok's infiltration had been surgical. Dock workers on his payroll, port security looking the other way, cameras showing loops instead of live feeds. Mason's shipment was worth $20 million in street value, enough meth to supply Dallas for 6 months. The plan was elegant. Let Mason load it, then reveal to the cartel that he'd been skimming their product while we documented everything. Let them destroy each other while we disappeared with enough evidence to keep Detective Chen's focus elsewhere. I was positioned in a crane operator's booth with a rifle I'd practiced with for 2 weeks, David Park beside me running communications. Below, Jin-mok's team moved like ghosts between containers. Then Mason's voice crackled through a bullhorn. I know you're here, Jin-mok. Did you really think I wouldn't see this coming? Floodlights blazed to life. Suddenly the kill zone was exposed. Jin-mok's men caught in the open as Iron Skull's bikers and cartel sicarios poured from containers we'd thought were empty. Mason had anticipated everything. Contact rear. David shouted into his mic, but it was already chaos. Then I saw him. El Martillo, the cartel's enforcer, 6'4" of muscle and murder, moving with terrible purpose toward Jin-mok's position. But his eyes lifted to my crane booth, and I felt the weight of his attention like a target painted on my chest. He wasn't just hunting Jin-mok. He was hunting me. Keisha, stay down. Jin-mok's voice in my earpiece was sharp with fear I'd never heard before. El Martillo's men laid down suppressing fire, driving me from the booth. I ran, rifle clutched tight, adrenaline overriding terror. Behind me, David provided cover until he took a round and went down. Jin-mok appeared from between containers, his choice already made, abandoning his strategic position to reach me. A bullet caught his shoulder, spinning him, but he kept moving until we crashed together behind a rusted shipping container. You shouldn't have come for me, I gasped, hands shaking as I pressed against his wound. Not your decision to make. His jaw was tight with pain, but his eyes were fierce. Never your decision. Mason's voice boomed through the speakers. Give me the girl, Jin-mok. She's what started this war. End it by giving her back. I'll make sure the cartel gets their merchandise and you walk away alive. Jin-mok's response was immediate, shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. She's not mine to give. She belongs to herself. Bullets sparked off metal. We were trapped, ammunition running low, Jin-mok bleeding through my makeshift bandage. This was how it ended. Pinned down in a shipping container at the port of Houston, surrounded by men who wanted us dead. I love you, I whispered, because if these were my last words, I wanted them to matter. I know. His hand found mine, blood slick and warm. That's why you're going to survive this, even if I don't. I grabbed his face, forcing him to look at me. No. We both survive or neither of us does. That's when I saw it. The cargo crane towering above us, controls visible in the operator booth I'd abandoned. If I could reach it, the crane's magnets and hooks could create chaos, block Mason's exits, turn the battlefield to our advantage. But getting there meant crossing 40 feet of open space while El Martillo and a dozen sicarios had clear line of sight. Jin-mok read my expression, his eyes widening. Keisha, no. Trust me, I said, checking my remaining ammunition. 3 rounds. 3 chances. There has to be another way. I kissed him hard, tasting blood and gunpowder, and goodbye. I didn't survive Howard just to die trapped in a box. I'm done being cornered. Before he could stop me, I ran. I ran like David had taught me, unpredictable patterns, using every container and forklift for cover, staying low and fast. Bullets sparked off metal inches from my head, but Mason's men were so focused on me they didn't see Jin-mok's team repositioning, flanking their exposed positions. The crane booth ladder felt like climbing Everest, each rung a gamble that the next bullet wouldn't find me. My lungs burned. My hands slipped on blood. Mine or someone else's, I couldn't tell. Then I was inside, surrounded by controls I'd never used, buttons and levers labeled in faded English and Korean. No time for a manual. No time for doubt. I grabbed the main control stick and swung the massive crane hook in a wide arc. It crashed through a stack of containers, creating an avalanche of metal that blocked the sicario's advance. Mason's men scattered and I saw my opening, the giant electromagnet used for moving shipping containers. I activated it, lifted a container, and dropped it directly in front of El Martillo's position. The impact shook the entire port. That's my girl, Jin-mok's voice crackled through the earpiece, rough with pain and pride. His reinforcements finally broke through the security barriers, flooding the port with fresh forces. The tide turned. Mason's alliance crumbled as cartel soldiers realized their operation was exposed, their lieutenant's betrayal documented by cameras Jin-mok had planted. Through the crane's windows, I saw Mason making a break for a speedboat at the dock. Not on my watch. I swung the crane's hook, dropping it across his escape route. He turned, rage contorting his face, and charged toward Jin-mok's position instead. A last desperate attack. They met between containers, the confrontation brutal and personal. Mason sneered loud enough for me to hear through the open air. You threw away your empire for a woman. Jin-mok's response was ice cold. No. I built something better. An empire where I choose my own fate. You'll die having chosen nothing. They clashed, fists, knees, a knife appearing in Mason's hand from nowhere. I saw it flash in the floodlights, saw Jin-mok dodge but not fast enough. I didn't think. I dropped a 20-foot container between them. The impact separated them and Jin-mok's men swarmed Mason's position. When the dust cleared, Mason was on his knees, disarmed and surrounded. His empire of ambition collapsed in a single night. Sirens wailed in the distance. Detective Chen's cavalry, arriving to find a scene already choreographed. Mason's fingerprints on weapons used in murders, his burner phone full of cartel contacts. Enough evidence to make him the villain of every unsolved crime in Houston's recent history. Jin-mok had already won before the police arrived. When he found me in the crane booth, I was shaking so hard I couldn't uncurl my fingers from the controls. He climbed the ladder slowly, his shoulders still bleeding, and pulled me into his arms. You saved us, he murmured into my hair. You magnificent, terrifying woman. I laughed, the sound half hysterical, half triumph. I learned from the best. Dawn broke over the port of Houston in shades of orange and gold, painting the carnage in beautiful light. Below, police processed the scene, David Park coordinated cleanup, and Mason was loaded into a squad car, his reign over before it began. Jin-mok pulled something from his pocket, the jade dragon ring, its carving catching the early sun. I told you I'd give you this when we survived. He held it between us, not an offering but a question. Keisha Lawrence, will you rule beside me, not as my protected, not as my asset but as my equal? I looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the empire spread below us that we'd defended together through blood and fire. 2 weeks ago I'd been a woman hiding in the back of a car, terrified and broken. Now I was a queen choosing her crown. Yes. 6 months later I stood in a private dining room at Jin-mok's flagship restaurant, the jade dragon ring heavy and perfect on my finger, facing 3 rival organization leaders who'd requested this meeting. Gentlemen, I said, spreading financial projections across the table. My analysis shows your current distribution model is hemorrhaging profit. Jin-mok is offering partnership restructure through our Port of Houston connections, and everyone's margins improve 30%. The older man, Carlos Reyes, leaned back with a patronizing smile. And what does the pretty event planner know about distribution logistics? The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. I met his eyes with the same ice-cold precision Jin-mok had taught me. This pretty event planner coordinated the operation that took down Mason Cole and exposed the Sinaloa cartel's Houston pipeline. This pretty event planner runs the most profitable legitimate business in our portfolio, processing $15 million in wedding deposits last quarter. I smiled without warmth. But please continue underestimating me. It makes negotiations so much easier. Jin-mok, sitting beside me, said nothing. He didn't need to. Everyone in Houston's underworld knew by now. Disrespect Keisha, answered to Jin-mok. Reyes's associates shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. We accept the terms. After they left, Jin-mok pulled me into his office, that heat in his eyes I'd come to crave. You're devastating when you're ruthless. I learned from a dragon, I murmured against his lips. We'd bought a house in River Oaks 3 months ago, a sprawling estate with a pool and garden, far from the Rice military penthouse where this had all begun. Legitimate on paper, my wedding planning business, Lawrence Events, operated from a renovated Victorian in Montrose, booked solid with actual weddings and completely legal. Also a perfect front for money laundering and intelligence gathering. Every bride who hired me brought gossip, connections, information. I'd become Jin-mok's eyes and ears in Houston's social circles while he controlled the shadows. That evening we stood on our balcony overlooking the city lights, his arms wrapped around me from behind, the jade ring catching the glow of a Houston sunset. Any regrets? He asked quietly. I thought about the woman who'd hidden in his car, terrified and broken, believing she deserved nothing but Howard's abuse. Then I thought about the woman I'd become, Strategic advisor, business owner, partner to the most powerful crime lord in Texas. Just one, I said, turning in his arms. That I didn't find you sooner. But I suppose I had to become who I am now to deserve this. Jin-mok's expression softened in that way he reserved only for me. You always deserved it, Keisha. You just had to believe it. He kissed me then, tender and possessive and full of promise, and I tasted the future in it, dangerous and beautiful and ours. Below us, Houston sprawled in all its chaotic glory. The Fifth Ward where Jin-mok's restaurants thrived. The port where we'd won our war. The Galleria where I now shopped without fear of condescension, my black Amex and jade ring opening every door. We'd transformed trauma into power, fear into love, survival into sovereignty. I was no longer the woman running from a monster. I was the dragon's queen, ruling beside him as an equal, and Houston was ours. Mason Cole was serving consecutive life sentences. Detective Chin had closed her investigation. The Sinaloa cartel gave Houston a wide berth. Howard was dead and buried in an unmarked grave. And I wore a jade dragon ring and commanded respect from men who once would have dismissed me as merchandise. Jin-mok's hand covered mine, his thumb tracing the ring's carved scales. What are you thinking? I smiled, fierce and free. That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. We both are. He pulled me closer, his voice dropping to that intimate rumble that still made my pulse race. My queen. My equal. My Keisha. Not his possession. Not his asset. Not his saved victim. His partner. His choice. His love. And he was mine. The jade dragon ring caught the last rays of sunset, glinting like a promise kept. That protection became partnership, possession became choice. And a woman who'd hidden in a car trunk had claimed her rightful crown. We stood together, rulers of our empire, and watched the city bow to dragons. And that's how a woman who hid in a car trunk became a queen who rules an empire. If this story of transformation, love, and power resonated with you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what moment hit you hardest. Your next story is already waiting. Click the video on your screen now to watch another tale of dark romance and dangerous love. Subscribe so you never miss these stories of women who transform trauma into triumph. Until next time, remember, you were never the damsel. You were always the dragon.